Good evening and welcome to Alan's Music Room. We are here Sunday evening. We are going to be talking about rock and roll, conspiracy theories, and urban legends. So we've got all kinds of things about death, murder, Satanism, implanted cow tongues, all kinds of crazy stuff. And I've got a special guest that's going to be joining me for that. And we'll have him on in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about some upcoming shows. Next week is 4th of July, and I will be out of town. So I'm going to have a pre recorded show that's going to be going up. And on July 11th, which is the following Sunday, it's the 40th anniversary of the release of the Go Go's Beauty and the Beat. Their debut album. So we're going to be talking with Rob Levy about that. And the following week, July 18th, is Live Aid. It's the anniversary of, well, almost to the day, the anniversary of Live Aid. So we'll be doing a special episode about that, which I've done before for Dragon Con. So, but tonight, rock and roll conspiracy theories. And joining me is a good buddy of mine, Ashley Raburn. And now I can't hear you. You're muted.
I'm muted.
There we go.
There you go. Okay.
That's the biggest conspiracy.
That was the quote of 2020, right? You're muted?
Yeah, totally. All right. So we have got all kinds of, I mean, when you're talking about rock and roll, there are a million conspiracy theories, urban legends, rumors, all kinds of things that have gone around from people who have died mysteriously, people who supposedly have been murdered, all kinds of things. People who were Satanists, satanic messages laced in songs, all this kind of stuff. So we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of them. And to start us off, one of the biggest conspiracy theories that has ever gone around is that Paul died and was replaced by an imposter.
An imposter, yeah.
So start us off, man. I mean, this is a subject that you have done a lot of research on.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of amazing layers to this story. So get us started.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I love this story. And it's so much fun to hear people talk about it, the people who really like dig in. And the thing is, there are people that like truly believe this. This isn't just like a conspiracy theory that's like, yeah, maybe there are people that, I mean, there are a pretty big sect of people who believe that the Paul McCartney from 1966 forward is someone new. So what you really have to realize is that Paul McCartney is way better than the old Paul McCartney. Because they've done tons more stuff. I'm not saying the music's better, but I'm just saying, if that is true, there's this dude who's been going around as Paul McCartney for longer than Paul McCartney was Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Creating this music, right?
Right. I mean, not only later Beatles music, but solo music,
all
Wings
of
music, everything is this imposter dude.
Is this imposter, right? So the story goes that in 1966, there was, I think when John was making How I Won the War, there was a recording session or a writing session. I guess Paul was in, and Ringo and George were there, and Brian Epstein was really pressuring him to write songs, right? And so he was upset. He got upset. John wasn't there, and all this stuff. So he ran off or drove off late at one night. On a Wednesday night or it's Wednesday morning, really. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning, is the way the story goes. He drives off. He picks someone up. He picks up a hitchhiker. He's angry, and then he drives, and they both die. Right. So this hitchhiker, this female hitchhiker, dies with him. Now, the truth in this is he really did have a car accident in 1966. It goes back and forth, a car accident or a motorcycle accident. There was an accident, and you can see there's a scar as early as, I think, the picture from like the American album, Yesterday and Today. I think he has a scar there, and it's from that. And the car accident happened a little earlier than what they said.
Mm.
But so then he disappears, right? So after 66, no one sees the Beatles. They're not doing any. They stop touring.
Yeah.
They disappear, and they go into the studio. And they go into the studio. And then in 1967, they released Sergeant Pepper's on June 1st. So from this point in like November 1966 to right before they released Sergeant Pepper's and they start showing up. There's a notorious video of like a reporter like chasing Paul down. And that comes back. The reason I bring that video up is that's important. Because they chase him down and he's talking about the music and all of a sudden the way a lot of people would say is his mannerisms from 1966 to 1967 change. The mannerisms of 1967 match his mannerisms of today.
Mm-hmm.
The mannerisms of 1966 and before are completely different. Like when he's in interviews, like if you watch any interviews of Paul McCartney, even through now, like, he's and he's touching his nose and he's doing all this stuff. And like his mannerisms were completely different in 1966.
Mm-hmm.
Now you could probably throw that up to a lot of drugs between 1966 and 1967. But they are, I mean, they're very different. So this is when things start changing. So you start seeing, album covers that are different, psychedelic, doing these things. So you have this new kind of form of the Beatles. So I think everyone's looking for something.
Yeah.
Now, this whole rumor doesn't start. Like there's a few weird things that show up. Like there's like a fan club, a letter to a fan club in 1967. And then there's like some weird thing in 1968. And then in 1969, there is and I cannot remember the name and I can't remember the school. I just never can. There's a school newspaper like in the United States. And this guy gets a review copy of Abbey Road. And he was thinking, well, instead of just reviewing this, what if I just went crazy with it and like found all these things?
Right.
So he starts, he writes this review that is basically like, this is a clue because Paul is dead.
Yeah.
And everyone, and I'll talk about the clues, but this is kind of how this rumor, this story started. So everyone starts going crazy, and this radio host like gets this phone call. It's this notorious radio host or phone call. I mean, you can hear it. Like you can look it up. You can still hear this. There's a recording of it where the guy's like, "Hey, have you heard about Paul is dead or Paul being dead?" And he's like, "No, you're crazy. That's not true." He's like, and that's when the guy says, "Play Revolution number 9 backwards."
Yeah.
And the guy does it on the air.
Yeah.
And there it is. It says, "Turn me on, dead man." Or so that's what people hear when they hear that.
Yeah.
So you roll it back. It says number 9, number 9, number 9 backwards. It says, "Turn me on, dead man. Turn me on, dead man." And that one's pretty clear.
Yeah. And it's funny too because you talk about playing records backwards. We're going to get to that a little bit later because there's a whole lot of stuff around that.
So then people went crazy and they're like, let's look for clues. Let's look for clues, more clues. If there's one clue, there's probably lots of clues.
Right.
So at the end of Strawberry Fields, there's a thing that sounds like John saying, "I buried Paul." He has gone on record as saying he said cranberry sauce. And honestly, you can hear that distinctly.
Yeah.
I believe that's what he said. Although there are other versions of it that you're kind of like, maybe not. I don't know. Because there's 2 or 3 different versions of Strawberry Fields.
Yeah, that's true.
But so then they started looking at album covers and you get back. We'll work our way up, but Sergeant Pepper's is kind of that. I mean, there is no doubt that it is a funeral. I mean, that was the idea. As they were, I mean, the Beatles' artistic idea is we were burying the old Beatles,
Yeah.
and now we have this new group, Sergeant Pepper's. Is this something new? We're doing new music. It was a metaphor for what they really wanted to do.
Right.
So they did that. So it is on the front of the album. It is without a doubt a funeral. We know this. This is fact. This is the artistic direction of that album.
Mm.
Now, the neat thing about that particular, or if you go further, though, you have, I don't know, 75 people in the background of the Beatles there, and there's all kinds of clues people find in there. But the ones that are most interesting to me is the drum. The drum acts as a tombstone. It says Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And if you're looking at it as a grave, it does that. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Now, it's also convoluted, but it's interesting. So if you take a mirror where it says Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the Lonely Hearts Club Band, you put a mirror in the middle of that, it reflects, and it says 1 or 10, 1, 1, and an arrow, and that arrow is pointing to Paul McCartney, and it says he died. So it actually says a date, and I should know the date, but it's I think it's 10, and then the Roman numeral 10, and then 1 is what it actually reads. You can read it, and it's, or 11 maybe. It comes out to November, and it says arrow pointing to the Paul figure, and it says he die. And that is it. That is played. If you do that, it says he die. HEDIE. There's also a bass guitar that's made out of flowers, and it has 3 strings on it, and it spells out, or some people believe it spells out Paul ? There's a lot of, you start seeing a lot of the idea of the number 3,
right,
as opposed to 4. From this point forward, you see the 3 strings, Magical Mystery Tour. In this one, it was weird. In the Magical Mystery Tour, it gives a description of the movie, and it says, once upon a time there lived 4 or 5 wizards, and it was just like that 4 or 5. And you see a lot of that the number 3. I'm trying to think. There's some more. I'm losing it. The back of the Abbey Road cover, there are dots that if you draw a line between them, it says 3, and it's right in front of Beatles. It says 3 Beatles. In the Yellow Submarine, in the Sea of Holes, you only see you see 2 Paul McCartneys at one time.
That's right.
And he's the only Beatle that you see twice at the same time.
Right.
On the Magical Mystery Tour, on the cover, it has Paul sitting at a desk, and it says, "I was you." There's all kinds of weird little things like that. But back to Sergeant Pepper's, there's a bloody driving glove on on like this doll's knee, and there's also a white Aston Martin, which is what he drove. He was a big fan of Aston Martins, and he drove a white Aston Martin. And then you open the cover up, you have all the Beatles facing forward except for Paul. You have George pointing to Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock. So there's things like that. You've got the inside, the album sleeve, the record sleeve was red, and it was the only Beatle albums, and I think it was red and white. I think it was red, like almost like dripping down onto the white.
Right.
It's the only album that had red on it. The only album sleeve that was any different than anything else. So you get all of those kinds of things in there. Some subtle, some not. Oh, and then the OPD, officially pronounced dead. That's been proven that it was a badge for a Canadian fire department or something. Although some people say that Billy Shears or William Campbell is the person that replaced him, and he was actually Canadian. I'm not sure where the William Campbell name came from, but it's the name that always sticks. There's because William goes for Billy.
Yeah.
One of the neat things is Paul did a live album in, I don't know, the 90s, and it has P, and then he's jumping with his bass, and that makes the A, and then it says ULL. If
Right.
you do the mirror thing on that, it actually spells out Bill. So it keeps going, and it's very, very interesting. Now, one of the things
if I were
also in
Paul,
that,
though, if I were
I'm sorry?
Paul, I would keep it going myself, like
Yeah,
intentionally.
absolutely.
I would do these things so if people are intent on putting a mirror against my album cover, that it'll spell something insanely crazy.
Well, he did. Well, one of his albums, I haven't talked about Abbey Road yet. One of his
Right.
albums is him walking a dog across, and in the car, he has the Volkswagen Beetle there, and it says, I don't know, whatever age he was now,
Yeah.
because that said 28 if on the other one. If he hadn't died, he would be 28. And
Yeah.
so that whatever age it was, 49 now.
Yeah.
Or something.
That was one of the live albums that was, and I can't remember the name of it now, but that's one of my favorite McCartney live albums.
Yeah. So it just keeps going, and the rabbit hole just you dig down. There's a YouTuber, or not a YouTuber so much as these videos that mysteriously show up called the Winged Beetle, and the user is called A Paul Corpse. And
Lovely.
They dig it. They dig way down.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conspiracy. There was conspiracy that Mal Evans, who was their longtime roadie, I might not be Mal Evans. No, I think it's Mal Evans. There were two guys. There's Neil Aspinall and then Mal Evans. It was Mal Evans. He claimed to have written Sgt. Pepper's with Paul, and Paul always said he would give him credit.
Yeah.
And the story with him goes is Paul had finally admitted, or like had told him he was going to come out and give him credit. And then like that night he gets killed. Right. So it's this whole like, and it all connects back to that Paul is dead thing. Right. Because basically the thought goes that he was like, I'll tell them that you're not Paul. And then he ends up dead. Right.
Of course.
So it goes on. You've got another symbol that goes over is the hand over the head, which is a symbol that apparently means death in some cultures. It's one of those things that I've looked up, and I can't tell you what culture it is. There's the other thing that keeps coming up in this legend is that a walrus, the idea of a walrus, also stands for death in some cultures. But I can't find what cultures that is. No one ever can tell you. They always end it with in some cultures. And that said, though, I would imagine at that time, Paul was really into some avant-garde stuff. He was hanging out at the Indica Club, the Indica Gallery. There was the bookstore there. It may have also been the Indica bookstore. And they were getting all this like weird literature, and it sounds like the kind of thing that Paul himself would have come across, like if it stood for that. That even he would be like, let's just screw people, let's just screw with people, and let's like add some of this weird stuff in. There's that. There was the what's it called? The Magical Mystery Tour. He's the only one with a black rose. Yellow Submarine album cover has the hand over the head again. The White Album is set up like a hymn book, like the lyrics in it. You open it up, it's set up like hymns in a Catholic church. Then there's some stuff that's just outright talking about car wrecks. Like they start talking about car wrecks in their music at this time. So you've got the obvious one, which is A Day in the Life.
Yes.
He blew his mind out in a car, hadn't noticed that the lights has changed. Some people say that Lovely Rita was also the girl that he picked up. It was supposed to have been the hitchhiker.
That's right. That's right. But even if
then you've got
even if Paul had survived, though, it's not unusual that had gone through that experience that would influence, some of the writing.
Right.
So it's tenuous at best.
Oh, right. So the Ringo song on the White Album, "Don't Pass Me By," says you were in a car crash and you lost your head. And the story goes he was decapitated. Then I think there was a George Harrison song that kind of talks about being having a wreck in is it Blue Jay Way? There's a fog upon LA. My friends have lost their way. It kind of has this ominous feeling there also. What else? Yeah. So you dig so deep into this, and there are some people that have dug incredibly deep into these thoughts, these concepts, these clues. Into that as well. One of the more recent things that has come up, and this one's weird. So I'm going to start with this part, and then I'm going to go backwards. So, no, I won't. I'll start here. So I talked about that interview right before Sergeant Pepper's came out. So in that interview, there's a part where Paul scratches his nose and goes like this, and his mustache comes off on his hand. Like, you can see the video of it. It exists. So inside Sergeant Pepper's, there is a cutout of a mustache. Like it came with it. It was to be Sergeant Pepper or whatever. Right. It was one of the things.
Right.
If you take the Sergeant Pepper's reprise, play it backwards, it actually says the whole chorus is "It was a fake mustache." Like, because it was a fake mustache. It was a fake mustache. It sounds like that.
Yeah.
Then, so let's fast forward to I don't know, the 2002 probably. You remember the album Love that came out, or the Cirque du Soleil thing?
Yeah.
George Martin remixed all those songs together, and he said there is a code in the album. He's like, there is a code in this album. It means something, whatever it means. So again, Love, if you take a mirror and you put it in the middle, it actually spells out code. But in the O, there's the shape of a mustache. So
wow.
So I say all that to say, and Abbey Road, there's some obvious things in there too. You've got the order that they're walking. He has bare feet. Some people say it symbolizes John's in front. It's John, Ringo, Paul, George. John's in front. He's the angel. He's wearing all white. He takes the body. No, it's John, Paul, Ringo, and George. Paul is the corpse. His cigarette's pointing down. His shoes are off. His eyes are closed. Ringo is the preacher, or the person that does the service, and then George is wearing jeans, and he is the Undertaker. That album has the I've already mentioned the Volkswagen Beetle that says 28 if.
Right.
LMW, which stands for Linda McCartney Weeps. 28 if. Speaking of Linda McCartney, that's weird too. He was engaged to Jane Asher in 1966.
Right.
There was apparently an engagement party for them, and he came with Linda Eastman to his engagement party. And everyone, and there are stories that say they're like, why isn't Paul with Jane? And someone told it was someone it would have been in the know, goes, oh no, that's a different Paul. So there's all kinds of weird stories like that. Also, that people are like, oh, well, they heard this, they heard that. You
I
can
had,
dig this down. This digs down into that like rabbit hole of Satanism and all that too. If you want to dig it that way, it is weird. I mean, the connections they've made connections to Paul McCartney and Charles Manson through this. It is just and that connection is strange. I mean, there is this weird connection because he did he always wrote Beatles song lyrics in the blood of his victims, or his people did.
Right.
One of the ones he did was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All good children come to go to heaven. Now that is a British thing. It's not an original Beatles thing, but he was doing all Beatles songs. That song didn't come out till a year after that was on the door. So it is coincidental. Or 6 months, maybe. It was time after. People shouldn't have heard that song.
Yeah.
So there's weird. The whole thing is weird, right? I mean, it's just a weird thing that exists. And like I said, people dig really far down into the rabbit hole of the Paul is dead mythos. I mean, I obviously have, right? I mean,
well,
all these things. I'm not sharing my PowerPoint presentation today, but I have one.
Well, we should have thought of that. We should have just done a whole hour.
No, I should have. I should have done it.
Right.
So yeah, it's bizarre. It's strange. It's intriguing. It's a cool fiction, right? If nothing else.
Exactly. So what is it that got you so interested in it? What was it? When will you first encounter the Paul is dead theory, and what was it that got you so interested in digging into it?
So I heard about it a long time ago. I think my dad told me about it. It was like, oh, this is so, and he's interested in the same way I am, weird things like that. And he's like, oh, let's find the clues and all those things. So I was kind of always aware of it. Then I have a friend, a very good friend, who we always was kind of like go back and forth and talk about it. And then it got to be where I just really started enjoying that. And then I found this YouTube video that I mentioned and was just like, oh, that's cool. I like that stuff. I'll watch it. And I just fell down the rabbit hole. And it is truly a rabbit hole. Like you watch one, then you're like, oh, I'll watch something else. And then I'll go find this. And then I'll look at this. And then I'll listen to the Fireman album that Paul McCartney put out in like 99. And then it'll take you to this. It's
right.
There's all these weird connections with Aleister Crowley. There's like these portraits that connect, and he's on the Sgt. Pepper's cover, and there are people who have made all these weird connections, and it is fascinating. It is just I can't tell you when. I just started. I know I read a book about it in high school. That book's called The Walrus is Paul. I guess I was in college, and then I always liked it, and then I've just kind of gone on and kept up with it.
Right. It's a good subject matter. I mean, it's really fascinating.
It's just ripe with the things people find. I mean, people find even when you're like, oh, I think I've gotten everything out of that album, someone will be like, oh no, it says this. And people have found really interesting things. Now, one of the interesting things is I can go back to albums before 1966 and find Paul is Dead references, right? Like,
sure.
If I wanted to.
Right.
I mentioned the Yesterday and Today album. He's in a box in that album, in that American Picture album picture. He's in a box. So you can say, oh, well, the Paul McCartney's in, but that was before he supposedly died. So you can make anything out of anything.
That's very true.
We can go into, I mean, there are other songs that if you play them backwards, it says things, but number 9 is the most obvious. And then it was a fake mustache thing is relatively new. And one of the things that people, so this is true. There was for Beatles Anthology 2, it was scheduled on some day, whatever day it was scheduled to release on, but it was pushed back like 2 months. And the story goes, Paul McCartney ordered all of the albums destroyed. And I think that's true. I don't think that's a rumor. I think he was the one that wanted that done.
Yeah.
That they were all destroyed and they had to be repressed, and then it came back out. It was released 2 months later, or I don't know, 4 months later. The story that a lot of people kind of go on is that they were going to play one of the tracks was going to be "It Was a Fake Mustache," which was the Sgt. Pepper's Backwards was going to be a track on it, and there are people who swear to that swear that is the reason they were destroyed. And he got cold feet.
Right.
The fake Paul got cold feet, because the other thing that keeps coming up in this is that he wants to tell people, but he can't. Another thing that's weird is there is a lady whose mom has claimed for, I don't know, 60 years that she was the illegitimate child of Paul McCartney. And she looks like Paul McCartney. She was from Liverpool from the old days. And they've had blood tests done. And the person who's claiming to be his daughter has basically says, well, they keep sending it. He won't come to us, and they keep sending a body double. They keep sending the blood in, and it's a double. It doesn't match. I mean, sure, maybe she's just, probably she's just not his daughter,
right?
But I mean, this parent, her parent was like 100% like, you are Paul McCartney's daughter. There you go. I mean, like, and she's had blood tests done, and it keeps coming back negative. So if he's not Paul McCartney, then it wouldn't come back, right? So a lot of people use that in evidence. So I mean, I think that's kind of thin.
Yeah.
But it is really fun to kind of think through that.
Yeah. You know, and it's interesting. I think of parallels between this and the movie Yesterday, where it's a reality in which the Beatles never existed, but one guy remembers them and sets himself up as this character who has written all these amazing songs, but it's because he remembers these songs that no one else is aware of, and he struggles with whether or not to come out, you know, to tell people. And I absolutely loved that movie. But when I saw it, I kept thinking about this whole plot, you know. Did you see it?
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it's so good.
I know. I keep hearing it, and I'm horrible for not seeing it. I keep holding out on a really good Beatles biopic.
I know.
And
oh, well, you know, we're going to have you on again after the documentary, the Peter Jackson documentary comes out.
6 hours. I mean,
6 hours.
That reminds me of, and it's over Thanksgiving. And it reminds me of, that's exactly when the anthologies came out. I was over Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's right.
In 95.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be fun. I'm excited.
Yeah.
6 hours and the rooftop concert.
I know, complete rooftop.
Yeah,
it's gonna be so awesome.
42 minutes. I don't think it's ever been all seen together.
It hasn't. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about Paul, and being the Beatles, there are lots of other rumors surrounding the Beatles.
Yeah,
and there's one about the death of John Lennon.
Yeah,
tell us about that.
Yeah, so there is. So the death of John Lennon is strange. I mean, it has come out now. At first, the murderer, I try not to say his name. It's just better that way, because he was mentally ill. That's kind of the way they explained it, right? And since then, he's kind of come out and said that he was wanting to be famous, and he knew he would always be famous, and that's why you don't say his name, right? Because you give in to that a little bit.
Yeah.
So he wanted to be famous. However, the weird thing about this is the thing that he did was he killed John Lennon. He shot him, shot 6 bullets. I think hit him 5 times. Goes and sits down, waits for the cops to arrive, and he's reading Catcher in the Rye. And this is something that is interesting because there's another famous shooter who also loved Catcher in the Rye. And that is, I don't know this guy's name. I'm not saying it for any reason. I don't know his name. And that is the person who shot Reagan when
Yeah.
Reagan was shot.
Mm-hmm.
He also was obsessed with Catcher in the Rye. So what little we know about Project MK Ultra, which was a CIA project where they used drugs and things like that to control people, they would use triggers. They would use triggers to control their victims. And Catcher in the Rye was a known trigger from that project.
Mm-hmm.
So there is thought, there are people who believe that John Lennon was killed by the American government.
Mm-hmm.
He was seen as problematic. He was seen as a peacenik. He was seen as someone who had a lot of control over the youth, even in 1980. And they had tried to kick him out of the country and failed. So eventually the thought is, well, maybe they just killed him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting about Lennon's murder because there's so much more to it than that.
Right.
The killer. Okay, so it comes down that at the time, David Bowie was in a play. He was doing the title role in The Elephant Man. And so the murder takes place right before John and Yoko are supposed to be attending a performance. So they, of course, have front row seats. And because, Bowie and Lennon were friends from way back. And so, Bowie is doing this performance in front of two empty seats. One of them because one of his best friends has just been killed. And the killer apparently had a hit list, and Bowie's name is second on the list.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
With John's name crossed out. Like, I've got my first one. And so that was like that was not a conspiracy theory. This is actual a thing. Yeah. But it's weird, that kind of connection between the two of them. Because they had worked together.
I didn't know that. I'd never heard that.
Isn't that interesting, though? They had worked together so many times. Lennon appeared on Bowie's Young Americans album. They co-wrote Fame. Bowie covered Across the Universe. There's all these connections, and Bowie's name was the next one on the Killer Who Shall Not Be Named list. I think that's just weird.
That is really weird. And the other thing is, I mean, the kind of notorious part is he actually had John Lennon sign his album before he murdered him, like 5 hours before or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's and like one of the last pictures of John Lennon alive, maybe the last picture, is with his murderer.
Yeah.
So it's just, that's a whole other episode. I think that's one of those things I think a lot about. I think a lot about that. I wasn't even born when that happened. I was born a year later. But still, it's had a lot of impact on me. I kind of lean towards McCartney stuff, but I love John Lennon and what he did and that kind of stuff. So yeah, and my conspiracy mind does go. I'm like, I wonder what was really going on there.
Right. Now, have you heard the story about the band Klaatu?
Yes, I have heard this. I heard this a few months ago, and I looked it up, and I was like, how? How did they mistake this? But yes, tell us the story.
It's interesting. Klaatu was a British prog band, and somehow it came out that they were actually the Beatles reformed, and that this was a new secret Beatles project, even though there's no real connection other than the album was released on Capitol, which was the Beatles' American label. And maybe there was some similarity in sound, not a lot, but it's
little, maybe.
It's very different. A crazy story.
Yeah. And people, and I think the thing is, they didn't deny it. Well, they also didn't say it was true. Right.
Right.
So they were kind of riding that wave, I think, as best they could.
There was another band that came around in 83, 4, 85, something like that, called Kingdom Come. And they had a very Zeppelin kind of sound. And there was this whole marketing campaign around them. So not a conspiracy theory, but there was a marketing campaign that basically led listeners to believe that this unnamed band was a reformation of Led Zeppelin. So I don't know if the Klaatu thing is a marketing ploy, that they were just trying to pass this off to get more attention for the release of the debut album, because that's exactly what happened with Kingdom Come. Their first album is a great album. It's so good. And there's definite Led Zeppelin influences on it. But the marketing was intentional, that they didn't say, they released this song. They didn't say who the song is by. They left, sort of the question in listeners' minds, who could this be? And of course, the obvious thing based on the sound of the song was Led Zeppelin. And the guy sounds enough like Robert Palmer. I mean, not Robert Palmer. Who am I talking about? That it was at least somewhat convincing. So not a conspiracy theory, but it's something that sort of ties back to that Klaatu thing. Crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you have a good thing and you can make some money on it,
I know, right?
Do it, right? I mean, you're not claiming you are, but you're also letting it ride.
But there are so many Beatles influenced bands or albums that could have done that same thing.
Right.
Yeah. And some of them maybe should have. I don't know. So you mentioned playing albums backwards. So let's talk about backward masking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So throughout the 80s, this rumor that you can play albums, because, back in the day when you had a turntable, you could spin it backwards with your finger and you could make it, you could hear what an album sounded like in reverse. And backward masking was that there are satanic messages that are hidden, so that when you play it forward the way the song should be, it sounds like part of the song. But when you play it backwards, you can tell that it's a message, some kind of like hidden text that is, supposed to influence the mind of the listener. And
so
I find this fascinating.
Yeah, there was a movie, like a Christian propaganda film called Hell's Bells, and and the whole thing was about this, right? It was about how the satanic messages in backmasking.
Yeah.
And that's like I had heard that, because you get Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah,
is the big one that you always hear about, right?
Yeah. But even played forward, Stairway to Heaven got accused of having all kinds of satanic, references
and being plagiarized. But that's a whole other thing. Yeah. Yeah. So backmasking is a huge thing in rock and roll. I mean, you name it. I mean, someone's been accused of it, right?
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of things there. I think Led Zeppelin, I think, is the most notorious when we think about it. But I already said the Beatles. I can't even. I mean, probably Kiss. I don't know. But
well, there are a number of conspiracy theories about Kiss, but I don't think backward masking is one of them. But Styx, on the Paradise Theater album, the song "Snowblind," which they now pretty much say was about cocaine use, but at the time, it was, supposedly if you spun it backwards, you would get, and I can't remember what the quote was that was supposed to have been said on the album, but it was something satanic. And it's like Styx, of all bands, you're going to accuse of Satanism. So if you can accuse Styx of it and find evidence of it, you'll find it anywhere,
So the same thing, I was thinking back, the Paul's Dead thing, another one that is that backward masking thing. There's one of the song, and my brain is going blank. I don't remember what it is, but the end of it, there's some murmuring and you hear it. And if you play it backwards, it says, "Paul's a dead man, miss him, miss him." And that was Sgt. Pepper's also, but I don't remember. Maybe it was Magical Mystery Tour. Oh no, it was on the White Album. I can hear it, and then it goes into Rocky Raccoon. But I
Oh
can't
yeah.
think of the song that is that song. So yeah, there's it's everywhere.
Oh, exactly. So you mentioned Kiss. So there are a couple of really good conspiracy theories about Kiss. The first one being, and I was a Kiss fan growing up in the 70s, so I heard all these things. The first one is that, of course, KISS stands for, knights or kings in Satan's service, that they were Satanists and they were coming for your children and all this kind of stuff.
They were going to
And
teach
that
them all
one's
to play Dungeons and Dragons while they were at it.
right. And that was kind of silly, but it was, parental fear for these characters who came out dressed in these outlandish. I mean, it's not unusual to see things like, Lady Gaga and all this kind of stuff. But when Kiss was doing it, it was basically Kiss and Alice Cooper who were doing these kind of things, and that was about it. So
David
it was
Bowie a little bit, I guess, but
kind of, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But the one sort of urban legend that surrounds Kiss back in the day, in the 70s, that is interesting, and I found out is Gene's favorite rumor about him and about the band is that his tongue is not a real tongue. It's actually a cow's tongue grafted on. So
Yeah, I've heard this.
yeah, and the other thing is that it was insured for $1 million with whatever the big insurance company is in London that does all the artworks and the museums and everything.
His
So
tongue
that's
was?
his tongue,
Oh.
because that was his greatest asset.
There's another Kiss thing, and this one might be true. So it may not be an urban legend, it might be true, but it's weird regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Is Marvel Comics #1?
It is true.
Okay, is that true?
Yes.
Marvel Comics did a Kiss comic book, and it had the ink was laced with their blood.
Their blood.
Yeah.
The red ink,
The red ink,
specifically.
yeah.
Yeah. And there's photos of them, and who knows if it's actually their blood. But I mean, there's like footage of them like getting like blood drawn and all this kind of stuff. And so, there's these photos of them with these little vials, and they dip them into. But the ink vat was
Right.
huge because they're printing like 1 million copies of this comic book. And so it would have, it would not have like affected the structure of the ink or anything like that. But yeah, supposedly so. Now there is a rumor around that the same vat of ink got used for an issue of Sports Illustrated. So that Kiss's blood ended up in Sports Illustrated as well. But I'm sure that is not true.
Right.
So okay, thinking about the 70s. One of my absolute favorite stories, and this was sort of legitimized with a sort of documentary that came out on the radio, and that was the song "Love Roller Coaster."
Right.
Oh my gosh! So, a great tune. I loved it at the time, and there's a part in the bridge, in sort of like the instrumental breakdown, where you hear a woman scream. Now, when you hear the song, your assumption is that she's riding a roller coaster and you're going down a steep, incline or decline. And how you scream when you go down. And that's all it was intended to represent. But the story is that in the studio next to where the band was recording, a woman was murdered. I love this story. And the really interesting thing is that, I mean, this circulated quite a bit, and it was talked about by DJs. And there was an hour-long special it was a radio special, and it was done to investigate the story or whatever. It was so stupid, but I was a kid at the time, and I was fascinated by it. I didn't really think that it had happened, but the possibility that it happened, and because I loved things that would scare me, when I was a kid.
So this is the same kind of thing that this isn't music related, but there's a similar story in The Wizard of Oz, right?
There
And
is.
this
That's true.
always made me think of that story.
Yeah.
That one of the actors playing one of the Munchkins hung
Yeah.
themselves in the Wizard
Yeah.
of Oz, and it comes down. And
Yeah.
it's obviously not. If you look at it, it's just like, oh, I see what you're saying there, but no.
Right.
Or an electrician fell down and was hung
Mm-hmm.
or something. But it's that story always, like, those two stories cross for me because they're so similar, because it's an accidental pickup of something so sinister, right? I mean, that's
Right. And I would
incredibly
listen.
sinister.
And I would
Now, the
listen.
question is, was Phil Spector in the other room?
I mean, it's possible. But it's so funny because I would listen to that song after hearing all this rumor about it, and then hearing that little radio documentary that sort of like, I mean, it never said, this is false. It never really said it was true either, but it left the question open. And every time I listened to that song, that little scream would creep me out. I absolutely loved it.
That is super fun.
Man, it is. Love it. You were telling me about one about Avril Lavigne, which I had not heard before. Tell me this.
Yeah, this one of my students told me this, because I was talking about the Paul is Dead thing, and they're like, oh, well, that's like Avril Lavigne. And I don't know anything about Avril Lavigne. I'm not a huge fan. I'm kind of familiar. Right. I remember when she first came out, because I'm old and crotchety, Alan. I'm getting old.
Now? I know you are about Doctor Who.
Yeah. So, so the story goes that Avril Lavigne had a body double. Like, and this is fairly well known. Like, she would show up, and like, if she didn't want to do something, if I've heard this, I don't know how true this is. I don't know how true any of this is. I'm just telling you the story.
Yeah.
And she went through a lot of depression, and so she would send the body double to events she didn't want to go to. And then the story comes that Avril Lavigne died, and the body double took her place. And the body double had been dating the Nickelback guy, and then eventually they get married, because Avril Lavigne is married to him, or was at one time. I don't follow it. And so it's very Paul is Dead-ish. Right. But it's like with this person that did exist, like there was a body double, and that body double like can't be found now. Like, and like they have a name, they know who it is, but like she like just became Avril Lavigne.
Interesting.
And Avril Lavigne either died, the story goes, either just died or by suicide, one. And like she just took her. But that, again, craziness.
Right. I don't know. I think if there was a body double who took her place, the body double could have done a better job with maintaining Avril's career. Because,
well, maybe that's why. Maybe she couldn't sing, right? So she just needed to just.
Because she was huge for a while, and I know she's continued to record here and there, and an album came out not too long ago, but you never hear anything about Avril Lavigne anymore.
Right, and that's that's one of the most modern kind of things that I've heard, like this kind of thing.
Yeah.
The other one that's kind of in the same vein is that I was joking about this with one of our friends a few years ago, Josh, and he was like, "What are you talking about?" And then he like heard a thing, and he was like, "Oh, people really believe this." And it is that the MTV Music Awards is a satanic rite.
Oh, I have not heard this.
Yeah, so if you look at the MTV Music Awards, there is always a sacrifice of some sort. Maybe not physical, but there is some something that represents sacrifice. There are always like candles. There are always like, it does this thing. One of my friends was telling me about this, and I was like, that's crazy. And I looked it up, and it's true. Like, there's this thing that like always comes up right before it comes, like when it goes to commercial and comes back. It's these checkered, black and white checker thing, and it goes like this, and then it comes back.
Okay.
And he was like, you can like count for when that's going to happen. You're like, it's going to come to a checkerboard. Okay, we're back. And it was just like, and that has something to do with it. But yeah, the MTV Music Award is a satanic rite. And it is there is always a sacrifice. There is always something like that. And then you have Katy Perry's concert at that, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That was very obviously like it felt like that, right? So you like, it like legitimizes it a little bit. I mean, it's just like, well, fine, sure, now you're going to do that. You know, Lady Gaga coming in the egg or what, I think that was MTV Music Award, which represented something, and there was this whole thing about it. But I was joking with Josh. I was like, oh yeah, satanic rites. He's like, oh, you're crazy. And then like the day after, he was like, people really believe this, because it started like showing up in feeds.
Right.
But
that's
yeah,
hilarious.
it is bizarre.
That's one I had not heard before, and I'm studying up on MTV because the 40th anniversary is coming up, and I'm going to be doing a special.
Well, look up
show about
MTV
that.
Music Awards Satanic Rite, because it's a thing.
That's hilarious.
That people believe.
Okay, so another good one that I really like is about Supertramp. And they're
I don't think I know this one. I know Supertramp, but I don't know.
It's really interesting. Their biggest album was called Breakfast in America. So the album cover is you're basically on a plane in a seat at a window, and you're looking out over the New York skyline, and you see the Twin Towers. And the idea is that they predicted 9/11, because when you're looking at it, you see the Twin Towers and the name Supertramp above it, but the towers sort of partially obscure the U and the P in super. And if you look at it backwards, then the partially obscured U, it looks like a 9 and 11. And then on the back of the cover, there's a plane flying towards the Twin Towers, and the album is called Breakfast in America. The plane crash happened at breakfast time. So
I hadn't heard that. Isn't
that crazy?
Bad. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of those, mirrors apparently can reveal all kinds of things that were never intended to be there. But I love that one. I think that's crazy. And of course it's, they say it's not true, because how could it be? But I think it's fascinating that you can find these things, Well,
like I said earlier, you can read anything into anything, right?
Exactly right.
Like you can be like, oh, that's crazy. Someone went to a Kiss concert and was like, that has to be a cow tongue, right? And then it's like, and then they tell two friends, and they tell two friends, and they tell two friends, and it moved from that has to be a cow tongue, that thing's crazy, to Gene Simmons has implanted a cow tongue into his mouth.
It's funny because you can sort of see where Knights in Satan's Service comes up, because parents are afraid of the imagery and the possible corruption of their children. And
that was during the Satanic Panic of the 80s and the late 70s. And yeah, I mean,
but where does the cow tongue thing even start? Like, that's just,
I'm telling you, it's
crazy.
It's like, that has to be a cow tongue, just and then it just.
Why it's funny. Not, right? It's funny that something like that gets so peripheral.
Or if that's Gene Simmons' favorite, maybe he just started it. Maybe he's like, yeah, you know what? This is a cow tongue, and then it just like went out from there.
Gene Simmons is a marketing genius. Maybe that was his first, foray into the marketing world of how to get Kiss famous, was to start rumors like that and get press out of it.
Yeah, it's insane.
All right, there are so many stories about this stuff, man, but we've only got a couple of minutes left. Do you have any last one that you can throw at us?
No, I mean, there's some stories that say like all the Beatles were different people. Like there's been like 20 different representations of each Beatle.
Yeah.
But I can go all day on Beatle ones, but I can't think of any other ones.
True. I mean, there's ones like Jimi Hendrix was murdered by his manager. There's the crazy one is that Bowie, and this actually, I'm going to do this one. This is so bizarre. Bowie predicted Kanye West on the cover of the Ziggy Stardust album. He's standing on a street by a light pole and the line of a building, and above the doorway that he's standing by is a sign that says, K.West. Now, that's not a whole lot to go on, but the first song on the album is called 5 Years, and it's about Earth is about to be destroyed, and the only thing that will save us is if this rock and roll sort of messiah, it's this alien character Ziggy, comes to Earth and saves us. 5 years later, Kanye West is born.
Yeah, that's weird.
Isn't that crazy?
I'm sure he loves that theory. Kanye
Of course
West.
he does, because a few years later, after Bowie died, Kanye came out with some statement about how he was the artistic successor to David Bowie, and Bowie fans were like, "F no, you are not," kind of thing. So yeah, that's a crazy one, but
that is crazy.
We might have to do a part 2 of this topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you and I will be back on after Thanksgiving to talk about the Beatles documentary that's coming out.
Absolutely.
Man, I can't wait for that.
I am so excited.
So thank you very much for a fun talk about Paul, about the Beatles, about crazy stories behind rock and roll.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for everybody watching, we will be back next Sunday night. Actually, next Sunday night, I won't be back because I'll be on vacation, but I'll have some show that's going to go out at 9 o'clock. I mean, at 8 o'clock. I haven't decided what it is yet. I have an idea. I think I'm going to do an album countdown, because that's something I can record easily, and it'll be quick and fun. So anyway, we will see you guys next time. Thank you, Ashley, for hanging out. It is always a joy to have you on and talk to you.
It's always fun to be here.
And everybody, be safe, be cool, don't be a dick, treat people nicely, and we will see you again next time.